commander, let's light the sky. Training sharper drone pilots, learning how to fly. Mission ready mindset, safety leading every plan. Skills that build confidence from takeoff through the scan. Tune in at Sky Commander, come join the crew today. Learning smart, fly with purpose, level up your way. We see more, no sooner, that's the edge we're here to spread. See above, go beyond, get ahead.
Okay, let's get started. So if you break your arm, an X-ray gives you this really comforting binary answer.
Right. Exactly. It's very clear.
Yeah, you just look at the film, you see the jagged white line, and the doctor points right at it.
Yeah.
Broken.
I mean, the system failed and the evidence is just right there in black and white.
Exactly. And it is incredibly comforting, because the hazard is totally visible. We're wired to want the alarm to sound or the red light to flash.
Yeah, we want the error message to just pop up in big, bold letters.
Right. But when a 3-pound flying supercomputer starts drifting toward a 200-foot steel telecom tower, the system doesn't scream that it's failing. It just whispers.
It really is the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters.
Oh, for sure.
You're stepping into a landscape where the hazards are entirely invisible, and the warnings are, well, they're subtle, overlapping, and so easily misinterpreted by the human brain.
Which is exactly why we're doing this, because today we are equipping you, yes, you listening right now, with the ultimate mental models to, survive and thrive in these highly complex, invisible sensor conflict environments.
And we're pulling this directly from some really intense, highly specialized sources today.
Right, specifically the Sky Commander analysis of drone operations at tower sites. Season 9, Episode 6, for those keeping track.
Yep.
But if you're thinking, well, I don't care because I don't fly drones for a living, just hold on a second.
Because the lessons here apply to so much more.
Exactly. The lessons about trusting automation when your inputs are bad, or managing degraded information, and just human psychology under pressure in general. These apply everywhere.
I mean, if you manage a software deployment, or if you run a corporate project relying on dashboards, you are, by definition, operating in a sensor conflict environment.
Yes. Okay, let's unpack this. Because the overarching principle here is basically turning an interference scare into better judgment, right?
That's the goal. The goal isn't to be a daredevil. You look at a tower site on a quiet morning, and the sky is clear, the gravel is flat, there is, no wind at all.
It looks perfect.
Right. The environment looks entirely benign to the human eye. But that calm exterior is just a mask.
Oh, completely.
The physical space around a telecom tower is actually a terrifying matrix of invisible threats. We're talking radio frequency noise, magnetic distortion, visual illusions.
So we start at the very beginning of the flight, because this is where the most dangerous psychological trap is set. The pilot pulls up to the gate, right, unloads the gear, sets the drone on the gravel, and just pushes the power button.
The props spin up.
Yeah, the props spin up, the app opens, the battery reads 100%, and this giant green banner just says, good to go.
And that right there is what the training material calls the arming trap.
The arming trap. The pilot just relaxes, right?
Exactly. The startup sequence feels like permission. It feels as though the aircraft has, magically inspected the entire site, analyzed the invisible environment, and confidently told the pilot that the operation is safe.
Right.
But that is a complete lie.
Okay, but wait, hold on. I mean, I spent $5,000 on my drone rig.
Sure.
It has omnidirectional sensors, AI tracking, redundant systems. You're telling me I can't trust a giant green good to go banner. Why would the manufacturer build the software that way if it wasn't a definitive safety check?
Well, it comes down to what the boot sequence is actually doing. When you power on a complex automated system, whether it is a drone or, say, a computer server, it is only confirming its own internal biology.
It's internal biology.
Yeah. The drone runs a logic check on its internal measurement unit, or IMU. It tests the gravity vectors. It asks the electronic speed controllers if they can draw current.
Okay, that makes sense.
It checks firmware compatibility. It confirms the battery voltage is sufficient to actually take off. Yeah. It is essentially taking its own pulse. It does not and physically cannot query the outside environment.
Yeah, it's like starting your car in a quiet driveway.
Right.
Just because the engine turns over and the radio comes on, that doesn't mean you'll definitely survive a blizzard on the highway, right?
Yeah.
The hardware just knows it has power and the components are talking to each other.
That's a perfect analogy. The drone has absolutely no idea what is waiting for it 200 feet in the air.
Right. It doesn't know about the tower.
Exactly. It doesn't know that the tower structure is going to block the radio frequency path on the far side. It has no clue that a 1/4-inch steel guy wire is slicing through the airspace at a 45-degree angle.
Or that the client is going to start breathing down your neck.
Right. It doesn't know the client's going to ask for a dangerous, unscripted maneuver in 10 minutes.
Which is why the regulations like Part 107 in the U.S. or Transport Canada's RPAS rules, they put the responsibility entirely on the remote pilot in command.
Because the law doesn't care if the app gave you a green light. The software cannot absorb legal or physical liability.
Yeah, the pilot has to confirm the environment is safe. But if the drone says it's fine, the pilot just thinks it's a routine job.
And that word right there, routine, is the catalyst for the whole error pattern. You fly the label, you give the job.
Oh, wow. You fly the label.
Yeah, if you label it a routine inspection, your baseline caution just plummets. You perform the normal startup, this false confidence balloons, and you completely bypass the most critical phase of the flight, which is the safety pause.
Right. You just go straight from arming the motors to flying up and taking pictures.
Exactly. They launch and immediately start production.
They skip earning trust. They assume that because the drone can take off from that specific flat piece of gravel, it can magically survive the airspace right next to the broadcast antennas.
But a launch point is just a snapshot in time. A tower mission is a moving test. The automation depends entirely on clean inputs to function.
Clean inputs, right.
I mean, the millions of dollars of R&D went into making the drone fly perfectly when it knows exactly where it is and which way it is pointing. If those inputs are clean, the automation is brilliant.
But if they're not?
If the inputs are poisoned, the output, the physical behavior of the aircraft is poisoned.
Okay, so the text introduces this concept of the confidence ladder, which I love.
It's a crucial mental model.
You don't just launch and assume the automation has your back. The aircraft is basically on probation.
Yes. You build trust in stages. You have pre-flight confidence on the ground.
Right.
Then you launch into, say, a 10-foot hover. That is hover confidence.
Like, is it holding perfectly still? Does the map actually match reality? Does the sound of the motors sound normal?
Right. Then you push out to a safe distance near the work area for standoff confidence. Only after the system proves it can handle the environment do you move into capture confidence and actually start doing the job.
You are looking for the environment to reveal its invisible hand. And at a tower site, that environment is actively trying to deceive the drone's sensors. So we move from the psychological strap of the startup into the actual physics of the site itself. We're looking at these poisoned inputs, and there's this vital memory hook in the text.
RF breaks the talk. Mag bends the map.
RF breaks the talk. Mag bends the map. Let's unpack the physics of that, starting with the first part. RF noise, radio frequency.
So we are flying a machine into a highly concentrated zone of communication equipment. You've got cellular arrays, microwave dishes, broadcast antennas. The air is completely saturated with electromagnetic energy.
I mean, it's just buzzing.
The drone and the controller communicate via a command and control link, the C2 link. This is a two-way radio conversation.
Right.
It carries your joystick inputs up to the aircraft, and it carries the video downlink and telemetry data back down to your screen. At a tower site, you're essentially trying to hold a quiet conversation in the middle of a screaming stadium crowd.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
The background noise score is so incredibly high that the drone struggles to distinguish your controller's commands from the ambient cellular energy.
See, I always assumed that if I could visually see my drone in the sky, the radio signal had a perfectly clear, straight path to it, like a laser beam connecting my controller to the drone.
That's a very common misconception. A radio signal does not propagate like a laser beam. It propagates as an expanding three-dimensional wave.
Okay.
The physical space that this wave occupies between the transmitter and the receiver is called the Fresnel zone. Think of it as an invisible, highly elongated football made of energy stretching between you and the drone.
A football?
Yeah, and it is widest right in the middle.
Okay, so if I am standing like 300 feet away from the tower and the drone is hovering right next to the steel lattice, that invisible football is massively wide in the middle of that gap.
Exactly. And if a physical obstruction, maybe a steel tower leg, a concrete blockhouse, a cluster of thick cables, or honestly, even your own body, if that intrudes into that invisible football shape, it disrupts the wave.
It squishes the football.
Right. It causes constructive and destructive interference. The signal weakens dramatically. So you can have perfect visual line of sight to the drone, but your RF line of sight is severely compromised because the Fresnel zone is being squeezed.
The signal degrades. RF breaks the talk. The video starts to stutter, the telemetry lags. But what about the second half of that rule? Mag bends the map.
This is the magnetic interference. While RF noise attacks the communication link, magnetic interference attacks the drone's fundamental sense of direction.
Because of the compass, right?
Yes. Inside the aircraft is a magnetometer. It's basically a digital compass measuring the local magnetic flux in microteslas to determine which way the nose is pointing relative to the Earth's magnetic poles.
And a telecom site is just a vertical mountain of steel and electricity.
Thousands of pounds of galvanized steel, reinforced concrete pads filled with metal rebar, chain link fences, energized electrical cabinets pulling massive voltage, buried grounding rings radiating outward from the base.
Right.
All of these elements generate their own localized magnetic anomalies. They massively distort the Earth's natural magnetic field.
So the drone's compass doesn't magically know where true north is.
Not at all. It just reads whatever field it happens to be sitting in.
So if I set the drone down on a reinforced concrete pad next to a steel gate, the magnetic field is heavily distorted right there. The compass reads that localized anomaly and decides, okay, north is this way.
But the map is bent. It's a complete lie.
And this creates that critical condition the source talks about, right? Sensor disagreement.
Exactly. The drone relies on a complex algorithmic process called sensor fusion. It is constantly taking data from the GPS, the IMU, the downward-facing vision sensors, and the compass.
It's pulling from everywhere.
Yeah, and it passes all this data through what's called a Kalman filter. It's essentially holding a continuous vote to figure out its exact position and orientation in space.
Right. So the GPS says, hey, we are hovering over this specific coordinate. The IMU says we are perfectly level, we're not tilting. The vision sensors see the gravel below and say, yep, we are stationary.
But the compass.
Right. The compass, which is being warped by the steel gate, insists the drone is actually slowly rotating.
So the vote is split. The flight controller is forced to make a decision based on conflicting data. It tries to correct for a rotation that isn't actually physically happening.
Oh, man.
So the drone applies motor power to stop the phantom spin. Visually, the pilot sees the drone suddenly twitch or begin sweeping in wide, uncommanded circles. It's a phenomenon called the toilet bowl effect.
That sounds terrifying.
It is.
Yeah.
But what's fascinating here is that the aircraft isn't broken. It is faithfully executing commands based on poisoned inputs.
Okay, I have a very strong instinct here, and I want to push back on this.
Sure, go ahead.
If I'm setting up near a metal gate and the app throws a yellow compass error on my screen, my immediate reaction is to just go into the settings, tap calibrate compass, pick up the drone, and do the calibration dance.
Spin.
Yeah, you rotate it horizontally, you point the nose down, rotate it vertically, the warning clears, the light turns green. Why is the training material so aggressively against doing this?
Because calibration is not a reset button. It is a teaching mechanism.
A teaching mechanism, okay.
When you run the calibration sequence, you are actively teaching the drone's magnetometer what the baseline, quote-unquote, normal magnetic background looks like.
Uh-oh, I see where this is going.
If you perform that dance while standing 2 feet away from a massive steel structure, you are intentionally teaching the drone that the heavily distorted magnetic anomaly of the gate is the new normal.
I am baking the lie right into the drone's brain.
Exactly. You bake the bad reference deep into the flight controller's logic.
Yeah.
The app says calibration successful, and you feel this surge of false confidence because the warning disappeared. So you launch. The drone flies 50 feet up and away from the gate. It enters clean, normal airspace with a natural magnetic field. But you programmed it to expect massive distortion.
So when it doesn't find the anomaly.
The internal map shatters. The sensor fusion fails catastrophically in midair because you taught it the wrong reality.
That is wild. So the golden rule from the text is blunt. Do not teach the compass beside the thing that is lying to it.
Never.
If the app throws a warning, the correct move is to stop, pick up the drone, walk 30 feet away into an open space, set it down, and just reassess. The environment usually clears the warning itself once you leave the anomaly, right?
Usually, yes.
Yeah.
A telecom site is a stacked hazard environment. You don't just face physical risks like steel and wires. You face signal risks compromising the Fresnel zone and sensor risks confusing the compass.
It's all stacking up.
And when those poisoned inputs combine, the cascade of failure shifts. It stops being a mechanical problem and becomes a human problem.
Right. And this moves us perfectly into Section 3, the degradation of information and the trap of visual line of sight, or VLOS. Because we know RF noise degrades the connection, but it rarely just snaps the connection instantly, does it?
No, it degrades it slowly. The controlling, your actual stick inputs, usually holds up the longest because it requires very little bandwidth. What suffers first is the heavy data.
The video and the telemetry.
Exactly. The 4K video feed from the camera requires massive bandwidth. As the Fresnel zone compresses and the RF noise floor rises, the video struggles, the frame rate drops, the image pixelates. It stutters or just freezes completely.
And when the video stutters, pilot behavior instantly changes. Like, what is the human instinct? You stare at the screen.
You lock in.
You stop scanning the sky.
Right.
You stop looking at the physical drone. You start tapping the glass, checking the signal bars, just like trying to will the video feedback to life.
That is screen fixation. The screen provides the deliverable, the high-resolution image of the antenna bracket you are being paid to inspect. But the screen ruthlessly hides the full risk picture.
Oh, completely. It has a tiny field of view.
Right. It does not show the guy wire hanging 10 feet off the left wing. It does not show the weather front moving in. It does not show the crop duster entering the local airspace. By fixating on a lagging screen, the pilot winningly surrenders their spatial awareness.
Think about the concept of video lag for a second. Here's where it gets really interesting.
Sure.
You are flying a drone 3 feet away from a steel tower leg. The RF interference causes the video to lag by, say, half a second. It is exactly like playing a high-speed racing video game on a server with terrible internet latency while driving along a cliff edge.
That's a great visual.
You aren't seeing where the vehicle is, you are seeing where it was half a second ago.
And half a second is an absolute eternity in tight spatial geometry. If the drone is drifting due to a wind gust and you are reacting to old video data, your joystick inputs will be inherently wrong.
Because you're reacting to the past.
Exactly. You will apply a correction after the drone has already moved past the point you are looking at. So you will overcorrect. The drone swings back. You correct again, too late.
You induce an oscillation yourself.
You induce pilot oscillations simply because your eyes are operating in the past. Weak signal harms awareness long before it harms control.
And the same illusion applies to telemetry, right? We love numbers because they feel authoritative. Altitude, 150 feet, distance to target, 20 feet, battery, 65%.
They feel very safe.
Yeah, if the screen tells me I have 20 feet of clearance from the tower lattice, my brain automatically categorizes that as a safe margin. But if the telemetry data is lagging because the C2 link is degraded, those numbers are ghosts.
Stale telemetry creates a profound vulnerability. Let's look at the mathematics of margin evaporation.
Okay, let's do it.
If you are flying a mapping mission over an open agricultural field and your drone drifts 6 feet due to a temporary sensor disagreement, the consequence is 0. You have hundreds of feet of empty air in every direction.
But if you are inspecting a tower and you're operating with a planned 20-foot safety standoff and the drone drifts 6 feet.
You did not just lose 6 feet, you instantly lost 30% of your total safety margin.
Wow.
30%.
And if your telemetry is lagging and your video is stuttering, that 30% margin evaporates without the system ever alerting you. You might not even realize you're drifting until the obstacle avoidance sensors, if they even see the steel, start screaming, putting you in a sudden reactive emergency.
Which fundamentally redefines how we must treat visual line of sight. I mean, the baseline assumption for most casual operators is just, can I physically see the blinking dot in the sky? If I can point to it, I have VLOS.
But the regulatory and operational standard is much deeper than mere visibility. Visibility is not awareness.
Right.
The FAA and Transport Canada define VLOS as the ability to see the aircraft well enough to know its location, its attitude, its altitude, its direction of flight, and to actively observe the airspace for other hazards. So if the drone is visually camouflaged against the gray steel lattice of the tower, and you are staring down at an iPad trying to decipher a pixelated, lagging video feed, you do not have functional VLOS.
Even if you could technically look up and spot it, your awareness is basically 0.
Exactly.
The question is not, can I see it? The question is, can I understand its energy state and trajectory? If the answer is no, you are flying blind.
So how do we combat this? The text mentions a rhythm.
Yes. To combat this, professional operators enforce a rigorous screen-to-sky rhythm.
Screen, aircraft, airspace, telemetry, aircraft, screen. It is a physical discipline. You have to force your neck to move.
You really do. You cannot allow yourself to live inside the camera feed. And this is where the visual observer, the VO, becomes an active safety sensor rather than just a passive spectator.
A VO at a tower site is not there to admire the flying or, just carry batteries.
Yeah. They are a workload reducer and an awareness multiplier. When the pilot is forced to break the rhythm, like when they must stare at the screen for 10 seconds to perfectly frame a tight shot of a serial number on an antenna, The VO takes over the spatial awareness.
They watch the physical clearance. They track the guy wires.
And their communication protocol has to be precise. A VO who says, hey, maybe watch out a little bit over there is useless.
Yeah, that doesn't help at all.
A professional VO uses clear, commanding language to shatter the pilot's screen fixation. They say, stop, hold position, you are drifting left, 10 feet to the guy wire. They provide actionable geometry.
I love that. Actionable geometry. And this psychology of screen fixation really leads us directly into the broader human factors. Because once the pilot's awareness is degraded by bad screens and stale data, the biggest threat is no longer the physical tower.
No, it's not.
The biggest threat is the pilot's own brain. We have to talk about completion bias.
Oh, completion bias. Heavily studied in aviation as get-there-itis. It is the overwhelming psychological drive to finish a task, even when objective conditions indicate you should abort.
Because as human beings, we get a dopamine hit from checking boxes, right?
Exactly. The closer we get to the finish line, the stronger the bias becomes, and the more risk we are willing to accept just to avoid the cognitive dissonance of stopping.
I only need one more shot. I just need the backside of this antenna array. I'm 90% done. I can push through.
And the trading text emphasizes that those internal monologues have destroyed more safety margins than sudden weather changes.
The hazard profile of a tower inspection naturally amplifies completion bias, too. Like, the first 80% of the job is usually straightforward. You fly the easy, open faces of the tower in clean air.
But the final 20% contains the most technically demanding shots. You need to position the drone tucked between a microwave dish and a cross brace on the far side of the tower, right where the RF signal is heavily shadowed and the magnetic interference is peaking.
You are at maximum environmental risk, experiencing maximum workload. But because you are almost done, your brain actively suppresses the warning signs.
A very dangerous loop.
So to break this loop, the Sky Commander protocol introduces a brilliantly simple mechanism. The first weird thing rule.
This is critical. The rule demands that you define, before the motors ever arm, exactly what your abort criteria will be based on the very first abnormal event.
Not the third abnormal event. Not when the drone is actively plummeting toward the Earth.
Yeah.
The very first weird thing.
Exactly. If the first weird thing is a momentary compass error while you are still in your hover check, you act.
If the first weird thing is the video freezing for a full second during your initial ascent, you act.
Right. If the drone exhibits an uncommanded 2-foot drift that doesn't match the ambient wind, you act.
Because emergencies at tower sites rarely go from a state of complete normalcy to catastrophic failure in 1 second.
Right, they follow an escalation chain. The chain starts with a subtle alert, a brief lag, a minor drift. The pilot feels a flicker of doubt, but delays taking action because of completion bias.
And during that delay,
The aircraft drifts deeper into bad geometry. The signal worsens. The pilot's cognitive workload spikes. They become task-saturated and overloaded. And finally, they are forced into making a reactive, panicked decision from a position of severe weakness.
So the first weird thing rule is basically a circuit breaker. It is designed to snap the escalation chain at the very first link before workload and panic compound.
Exactly. But it's interesting how experience levels dictate how pilots fall into this chain. Let's contrast the rookies with the veterans.
Okay, yeah. So the beginner's trap is just an absolute overtrust in automation.
Yes. Modern flight controllers are incredibly sophisticated. They can hold a GPS position in 20-mile-per-hour winds, dodge basic obstacles, and automatically return to the launch point if the battery gets low. This creates a really dangerous illusion of competence.
The new pilot pulls the drone out of the box, flies it a few times in an empty park, and thinks they are an aviator.
They assume the drone's software is omniscient. The drone will warn me if I shouldn't be here. It will stop itself before it hits a wire. It will save me.
Right. They lack the fundamental understanding that the automation relies entirely on the poisoned inputs of the tower environment.
But the veterans, they fall into an arguably more insidious psychological trap. The normalization of deviance.
Normalization of deviance? That sounds intense.
It happens when an experienced pilot with hundreds of hours on the sticks sees a compass warning flash on the screen. Instead of aborting, they rationalize it.
I've seen that warning 50 times at other sites. It always clears up. It's fine.
Exactly. They see the video lag and think, I can fly through this stutter. My manual stick skills are tight. They use their high level of manual proficiency to justify remaining in a degrading situation long after a rookie would have quit.
They normalize the whispers of system failure until the safety margin is entirely consumed.
Right. High skill is not permission to stay in a bad environment. The true mark of professional aviation is humility. And part of that humility is learning to listen to what the industry calls pilot discomfort.
Pilot discomfort. It's a fascinating concept because it isn't a superstition. It isn't magic.
No, it's your subconscious brain functioning as a highly advanced pattern recognition engine. Long before your conscious mind can articulate exactly what is going wrong, your brain is aggregating microcues.
Like what?
Like the sound of the propellers being slightly out of phase, indicating the motors are working asynchronously to fight a hidden drift. Or the map arrow on the screen doesn't perfectly align with the visual orientation of the nose. Or even your visual observer's body language shifting from relaxed to tense.
All these tiny data points combine to create a physical sensation, like a tightness in your chest or a knot in your stomach, and the text insists that discomfort is data. You do not push through it.
You pause, you enter a stable hover, and you ask yourself, what am I noticing that I haven't named yet?
But that internal pressure is frequently compounded by external pressure. The presence of the client on site completely alters the operational dynamic. Let's run a reality check on this.
Let's do it.
If I'm a commercial operator, the client has hired me, they own the telecom tower, they are standing right over my shoulder looking at the monitor, and they point to an upper antenna bracket and say, hey, can you just push in 10 feet closer to that mount? I really need a tight shot of the cotter pins.
Right, very common.
How do I say no to the person writing the check without sounding like I am scared, incompetent, or just refusing to do the job?
Well, you have to remember that the client does not understand the invisible hazard matrix. They do not know what a Fresnel zone is. They don't understand magnetometer distortion, and they cannot perceive the risk of an unmapped guy wire.
They operate on a simple assumption. Closer proximity equals higher resolution data.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it is your legal and professional obligation as the remote pilot in command to translate the invisible risk into operational language.
Right. You don't just say, I'm scared, the drone is acting weird, I don't want to crash. That destroys confidence.
You use the exact script provided in the training.
Let's hear it.
You say, I can get that detail from a safer standoff distance. I am seeing enough signal behavior that I need to change the geometry. I am going to reposition the aircraft so the tower structure does not sit between the controller and the drone.
Wow. You are not denying them the deliverable. You are dictating the method of capture. You are protecting their multi-million-dollar asset. You are protecting your equipment, and you are protecting the liability of the operation.
And a client who hears a pilot speak with that level of operational command will almost always defer to their judgment.
To help the pilot make that psychological pivot, to break the completion bias and manage the client pressure the training offers this mental mantra, you just say it to yourself. Mission paused, safety active.
Mission pause, safety active. It forces a complete cognitive reprioritization.
Right.
The objective of capturing a photograph of a cotter pin is immediately paused. The objective of maintaining control of a degraded aircraft and securing the airspace becomes the sole active mission.
Because a delayed photo delivery is just a minor logistical annoyance. A 3-pound drone crashing into an active broadcast array and falling 200 feet onto a generator cabinet is a catastrophic regulatory and reputational disaster.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we know how to manage the startup trap. We understand the poisoned inputs of RF and magnetic interference. We know how to combat screen fixation and completion bias.
Now, we need to translate that awareness into physical, tactical strategies to outsmart the tower before an emergency even triggers.
This is tactical mastery. Let's examine the standoff bowl concept.
Tactical mastery at a complex structure is rarely about demonstrating how close you can fly.
Yeah.
It is entirely about how well you manage spatial geometry. Imagine the telecom tower is in the center. The standoff bowl is a controlled, three-dimensional shell of airspace surrounding the structure. You operate on the surface of that shell. You do not penetrate the inner volume unless there is a quantifiable, evidence-driven requirement to do so.
And the protocol defines two competing distances here, the minimum useful distance and the maximum safe closeness.
Yes. The minimum useful distance is the furthest possible point from the tower where you can still acquire the required data quality. If you are flying a sensor with high optical zoom capabilities or shooting 45 megapixel still images, you might be able to capture perfect hardware detail from 50 feet away.
And the maximum safe closeness.
That is the absolute limit of proximity, dictated by the real-time conditions. The wind velocity, the health of the C2 link, the magnetic background, and even the pilot's current cognitive workload.
So the objective is to operate as close to the minimum useful distance as possible, basically staying far back.
Correct. Every single foot you move closer to the steel lattice must buy you undeniable evidence value. If pushing in 15 feet closer does not significantly improve the analytical quality of the photograph, it is unpriced risk. It serves absolutely no purpose other than pilot ego.
Standoff distance is a data quality tool then, not just a defensive safety measure.
Exactly. A photograph taken from 50 feet away, while the drone is in a perfectly stable hover in clean air, will be infinitely sharper than a blurry, skewed photo taken from 10 feet away, while the pilot is wrestling with a drifting aircraft and a stuttering video feed.
And this geometry dictates the flight path itself, because in promotional materials, you always see drones executing these continuous, cinematic, 360-degree blind orbits around the top of a structure.
But in a highly saturated RF environment, a continuous blind orbit is a critical geometric flaw.
Because as you orbit, you inevitably fly the drone to the far side of the tower.
Right. And suddenly, the entire physical mass of the structure, thousands of pounds of steel, active microwave dishes, and electronic equipment is sitting directly inside your Fresnel zone, completely eclipsing the line of sight between your controller and the aircraft.
The RF link is shattered. The video freezes, the telemetry stops, and your risk profile skyrockets while the drone is completely out of your visual sightline.
Which is why the professional alternative is segmented capture.
Segmented capture, so you basically divide the tower into faces.
Yes. You stand on the south side, launch, and fly the south face from a clean standoff position. You land. You physically pick up your equipment, walk to the east side of the compound, reestablish a clean line of sight, and fly the east face.
You dynamically reposition the command station so that the tower structure is never allowed to sit between the transmitter and the receiver.
It takes longer, it requires more walking, but it ensures continuous high-quality data links and absolute spatial control.
You are treating the tower as a hazard system, not just a tall pole. And the most dangerous component of that system isn't the steel lattice in the center, it's the guy wires.
Oh, the guy wires.
The text emphasizes that the actual physical boundary of the tower site is the anchor points, not the base of the structure.
Guy wires are the silent killers of tower operations. They drastically expand the hazard footprint outward. A pilot might be hyper-focused on maintaining a precise 15-foot clearance from the central steel structure, totally unaware that a tensioned steel cable is slicing down through the airspace immediately behind the drone.
And they are practically invisible. They are thin, they intersect at odd angles, and they visually blend into the bright sky or the complex background of trees and ground clutter.
Judging depth perception on a two-dimensional screen against a thin wire is nearly impossible.
This leads operators to fall back on their final layer of automation, right? The obstacle avoidance sensors. They assume the drone will simply stop itself if it gets too close to a wire.
Which is incredibly dangerous.
But I have stereoscopic vision sensors pointing in all directions, plus infrared time-of-flight sensors. Why won't the drone just brake?
Because obstacle sensors are helpers, not bodyguards. The vision cameras require contrast and surface area to calculate depth. A quarter-inch gray steel wire against a bright white overcast sky provides zero contrast.
Oh, I see.
And an infrared sensor emitting a pulse might completely miss the wire due to its narrow profile and angular deflection. If you rely on obstacle avoidance to save you from a guy wire while strafing sideways, the sensors will not see it until the physical impact occurs.
Wow.
Your only viable defenses are extreme standoff distance, a dedicated visual observer, and a solid pre-flight mental map of every anchor point.
Okay, so we have planned the perfect standoff bowl. We are using segmented capture. We map the guy wires, but the environment is inherently dynamic.
Right, things still happen.
Yeah, despite perfect planning, a massive cellular spike might hit, or a sudden magnetic anomaly might confuse the flight controller. So we have to talk about what to do when uncertainty escalates into an active threat. This is the art of recovery.
The transition from a calm inspection flight to an active recovery scenario is the crucible that really defines a pilot's competence.
Let's set the scene. Assume the video feed goes black, the telemetry freezes, and the visual observer calls out that the aircraft is drifting uncommanded toward the structure. The instinctual, immediate panic response for most modern operators is to hit the return to home button.
The RTH button.
Yeah.
It is marketed as a magic foolproof save me feature. You press it, and the drone comes back.
Right.
But hitting RTH in a complex vertical environment is gambling with the aircraft.
Gambling?
Because RTH is not artificial intelligence. It is a dumb, rigidly pre-programmed logic sequence. When activated, the drone evaluates its current altitude against its preset RTH altitude. It climbs to that height, rotates toward the recorded home GPS coordinate, and flies in a perfectly straight line until it is overhead and then descends.
But the drone does not have a real-time 3D topographical map of the site in its brain.
Exactly. What if your RTH altitude was casually left at 150 feet, but the upper guy wires attach at 160 feet? What if the drone is on the far side of the tower, and the straight line path back to the launch pad goes directly through the center of the steel lattice?
You press the button hoping for salvation, and you actively command the drone to fly straight into a structural intersection.
Right. RTH is only a viable safety tool if the pilot has meticulously pre-planned the altitude, the return path, and the home point location to guarantee clearance over every conceivable hazard. In the panic of a degraded signal event, smashing RTH is basically a death sentence for the aircraft.
So, if the automated safety net is actually a trap, what is the manual procedure? The training material provides the 4S recovery sequence. Let's go through it.
The 4 S's are a cognitive lifeline designed to prevent panic inputs. Number 1, stop. Stop advancing the aircraft. If you are flying an inspection pass, halt. Do not fly deeper into the interference zone.
Okay. Number 2, separate. Increase your physical distance from the tower, the guy wires, and the suspected source of the anomaly. Push the drone straight out into open airspace to buy yourself time and physical margin.
Number 3, simplify. Strip the cognitive workload down to bare aviation. Stop the camera recording. Ignore the gimbal pitch. Stop trying to yaw and ascend simultaneously. Reduce the task entirely to just stabilizing the flight platform.
Number 4, set down. If you separate the aircraft but the compass errors persist and your confidence in the flight controller stability does not immediately return, do not attempt to finish the mission. Find the nearest safe, clear piece of ground and land the drone.
Stop, separate, simplify, set down. And this sequence must be executed under the framework of the 3C rule: calm, control, and clearance.
Calm, control, clearance.
Calm is the psychological discipline to breathe and override the adrenaline spike. Clearance is the prioritization of physical distance from hazards. But control is the most critical mechanical aspect. Control means utilizing extremely small, deliberate joystick inputs.
Let's focus on that, because if my screen goes black and the VO yells that the drone is drifting toward the steel, the adrenaline demands that I smash the stick in the opposite direction as hard as possible to get away.
And that instinct to smash the sticks is precisely what destroys the aircraft. Remember, the drone is already struggling with poisoned inputs. The sensor fusion is degraded. If you slam the pitch stick backward in a panic, you are introducing massive violent energy into a destabilized system.
The flight controller tries to execute that hard bank, but because its spatial awareness is corrupted, it overshoots.
Yes. It banks too hard. It attempts to compensate, throwing the thrust in the other direction. It begins swinging wildly. This is the pendulum effect.
No.
By over-controlling a degraded system, you actively amplify the instability. A pilot panics, slams the yaw, the drone swings out, they overcorrect the other way, and they basically throw the aircraft directly into the guy wire they were trying to avoid.
Manual competence under pressure requires severe restraint. The rule is small input, observe, confirm, continue.
You gently nudge the stick away from the structure. You observe the physical aircraft in the sky. Did it translate the command correctly? Yes. You confirm the drift has stopped. Then you continue the gentle separation. You are not flying it like an arcade game.
Right.
You are asking the degraded system a question with a small input, waiting to see how it answers, and then making your next move.
And you cannot do this while staring at a black or frozen screen. You must look up. You must rely entirely on your visual observer for depth perception. You are executing a fundamental psychological shift. You are no longer a photographer inspecting an antenna. You are an aviator recovering a failing aircraft.
That shift is what defines the professional operator. And the process does not terminate when the drone safely touches the gravel either. The final act of recovery is the post-flight analysis and logging.
Because just writing interference encountered in a logbook is utterly useless. It teaches you nothing.
Nothing at all. A near miss is a gift. It is a massive influx of operational data that you survive to collect. You must log the exact telemetry. Date, time, altitude.
What face of the tower were you on? Where was the controller position?
Exactly. What specific warning triggered? Did the video lag before the compass failed? Did separating by 20 feet clear the anomaly?
You document it so that the next time you or another pilot fly that specific site, you know the north face has a heavy RF shadow, or the concrete pad by the generator induces a massive magnetic error. You convert the scare into actionable corporate intelligence.
You turn stress into institutional knowledge. That is the only mechanism by which an operation systematically reduces risk over time.
Well, we have journeyed through an immense operational landscape today. We dismantled the arming trap, realizing that a normal boot sequence is just the system taking its own pulse, not clearing the environment.
We expose the poisoned inputs, knowing that RS breaks the talk by choking the Fresnel zone, and magnetic interference bends the map by lying to the compass.
We examine how those poisoned inputs degrade the human pilot, turning visual line of sight into screen fixation and allowing safety margins to evaporate through stale telemetry.
We confronted the psychology of completion bias, the danger of pushing for that final shot, and the traps of both rookie overtrust and veteran normalization of deviance.
We learned to use the first weird thing rule to snap the escalation chain and the script to manage client pressure by keeping safety active.
We moved into tactical mastery, establishing the standoff goal, prioritizing minimum useful distance, and executing segmented capture to maintain clean geometry, all while respecting the invisible hazard of the guy wires.
And we finished with recovery, rejecting the gamble of the return to home button, executing the 4 S's: stop, separate, simplify, set down. Managing a degraded system with small inputs, manual competence, and rigorous logging.
The principles really are universal. I mean, am I trusting my automation blindly, or am I verifying the environment feeding it? When the dashboard is green but the reality feels chaotic, am I listening to that discomfort? Do I have the manual competence to step in when the system degrades?
Are you pushing forward into a failing project just because you are close to the finish line? Are you choosing ego over recovery? Think about your next high-stakes project, whatever your field. Before you begin, can you clearly define your exact first weird thing?
What is the specific predetermined signal that will make you pause, step back, and reevaluate your inputs?
Because if you wait until the system is screaming at you to figure out if your X-ray machine is broken, well, it's already too late.
Define the anomaly, back out early, protect the margin. A near miss isn't a success, it is a warning you survived.
Until next time, keep diving deep. That's a wrap on today's mission, Commander. See above, go beyond, get ahead. For more training, tools, and intel, head to skycommander.ca. If you learned something new, share it, subscribe, and leave us a 5-star debrief.